P.T. Logan's 5 Minutes of Terror. Twisted, troubling tales to send a chill up your spine.
My house. Melinda loves her house. She loves her house so much that she never lets anybody else inside. Not her mom, not her dad, not her brother or her sister. Nobody. You see, Melinda is a little paranoid. She's paranoid that someone will come into her house and never leave, which is why she has so many locks on the front door. Today, when she got home from work, she opened the door with 3 different keys, one of which was on her cell phone, the electronic kind, and immediately upon stepping inside, she closed the door. On the inside of the door, there weren't just 3 locks, but 8. These included 2 different types of chains that went from the door to a reinforced metal plate on the wall beside the door. Only after making sure that all of these locks were engaged could she relax. And to do so, she went to the fridge and poured herself a glass of wine. Then she sighed and felt the stress of the day start to let go, felt her shoulders loosen and the tightness in her chest fade. She was taking her second sip when she heard a knock at the door. All of the stress returned. "Who is it?" she shouted, but there was no answer. Maybe I'm just imagining things, Melinda thought. She started to take a third sip of her wine and nearly sputtered the red liquid onto the counter when a knock interrupted her again. "Who is it? Leave me alone." The reply came in the form of another knock. "I'll call the police, I swear. Get off my property right now." This seemed to do it. There were no further knocks for the next 10 seconds. Still, Melinda didn't want to risk another spill of her wine, so she waited for a good minute before taking another sip. And then, as if on cue, as if whoever was at the door had been waiting for this very instant, made another noise. Not a knock this time, but a resounding thump. Melinda had had enough. She placed her half-empty wine glass on the table and rushed to the door. But she wasn't as foolish as to open it right away. Instead, she lifted the small flap that covered the peephole and stared out. "Whoever's..." She stopped. There was no one there. Confused, Melinda pressed her cheek against the door as she tried to look this way and that, up and down the walkway to spy whoever it was who just knocked on her door and then tried to kick it in. But she still couldn't see anybody. "I'll call the police," she said again, but this time it was more of a whisper than a threat. And of course, she couldn't do that. Melinda couldn't call the police because this wasn't her house. 3 years ago, Melinda had been hired to clean this place. She'd advertised her cleaning services in and around town, and the woman who had previously inhabited the house was the first to answer. Her name was Greta, and she was in her mid-80s. And mean. Greta was extremely mean. Melinda wasn't the best house cleaner in the world, but she was far from the worst. And she worked as hard as she possibly could. But no matter how hard she worked, it was never good enough for Greta. Some of the things she said didn't even make sense. Greta would yell at her for not cleaning the upstairs bathroom, even though she was bound to a wheelchair, meaning that she couldn't actually make it upstairs to check. One time, after Melinda had spent hours washing all the dishes and had gone on to cleaning another part of the room, when she turned around, she caught the old woman spitting on the dish tray. Actually spitting on the clean dishes. Melinda called her on it, but Greta just said they needed to be washed again and that they were dirty. Then came the fateful day when Melinda arrived to clean the place, but she didn't hear Greta's raspy voice yelling at her to hurry up, to clean better than last time. She spent the first hour cleaning the kitchen. Greta always insisted she started with the kitchen before making her way into the woman's room. And that's when she found her. The reason why Greta never said anything when she'd entered is because she was unconscious. For a brief moment, Melinda thought that Greta was dead. But when she checked the woman's pulse, she found that it was weak but present. So Melinda did what anybody else would do. She called the ambulance and they came to pick her up. And then she made one little white lie. When the EMTs asked her who she was, she blurted out that she was Greta's daughter. That night, Melinda didn't leave after her 4-hour shift was up. She stayed, waiting for Greta to come home. But the woman didn't return that night, nor the next. And that was almost 3 years ago. To this day, she had no idea what had become of Greta. Melinda turned her head away from the door and was starting back toward the kitchen when she heard another knock. She rushed to the door, pulled the peephole back, and this time she saw something. A wheelchair. Greta's empty wheelchair was sitting in the center of the walkway. No, Melinda moaned. Against her better judgment, she started to undo the locks, wondering if the neighbors had already seen the wheelchair and were starting to ask questions. It took her a good 3 minutes to undo all of the locks and hurry outside. Melinda rushed to the wheelchair and grabbed it, and then quickly stored it down the side of the house, deciding that she would find a better place for it in the morning. Then she went back inside, slammed the door, and set about the rather arduous task of closing all the locks. When she was finally done, Melinda let out a huge exhale and placed her forehead against the cool door. This relief was short-lived, however. "This is my house," a croaking voice said. Melinda spun around. It was Greta, all right. It was Greta, only she didn't seem solid. And as a horrified Melinda squinted, she thought she could see her wine glass on the kitchen counter through Greta's body. She screamed and then turned back to the door, desperate to get out of this house that never was hers in the first place. She pulled the door handle, yanked on it, but it didn't open. Behind her, Melinda heard Greta's labored breathing as the woman came closer, but the door still wouldn't open. "The locks," Melinda's mind screamed at her. "You need to undo the locks." She started to undo the locks, but there were too many of them and it took too long. Before Melinda had removed even one chain, she felt icy hands on her shoulders and cool breath on her ear. "If you love my house so much, why would you ever want to leave?"
P.T. Logan's 5 Minutes of Terror. Twisted, troubling tales to send a chill up your spine.